Guys, so today, let's check if this is working. Yes. Today we're going to do passage 3 of the um of the 2011 to 2012 Form 1 MC ACT reading. Humanities. This passage is adapted from Bharati Mukherjee's essay, 400-Year-Old Woman, which appears in the anthology The Writer on Her Work, copyright 1991 by Janet Sternberg. That's kind of irrelevant, but just in case, let's read that. Okay. I was born into a class that did not live in its native language. I was born into a city that feared its future and trained me for emigration. I attended a school run by Irish nuns who regarded our walled-off school compound in Calcutta as a corner of England. My country, called in Bengali Desh, I have never seen. It is the ancestral home of my father and is now in Bangladesh. Nevertheless, I speak his dialect of Bengali and think of myself as belonging to Faridpur, the tiny village that was his birthplace. The larger political entity to which I gave my first allegiance, India, was not even a sovereign nation when I was born. My horoscope, cast by a neighborhood astrologer when I was a week-old infant, predicted that I would be a writer, that I would cross oceans and make my home among aliens. Brought up in a culture that places its faith in horoscopes, it never occurred to me to doubt it. The astrologer meant to offer me a melancholy future. To be destined to leave India was to be banished from the sources of true culture. The nuns at school, on the other hand, insinuated that India had long outlived its glories, and that if we wanted to be educated, modern woman, we'd hit the trail westward. All my girlhood, I straddled the seesaw of contradictions. I have found my way to the United States after many transit stops. The unglimpsed phantom Faridpur and the all-too-real Manhattan have merged as Desh. I am an American. I am an American writer, in the American mainstream, trying to extend it. This is a vitally important statement for me. I am not an Indian writer, not an expatriate. I am an immigrant. My investment is in American reality, not the Indian. It took me 10 painful years, from the early 70s to the early 80s, to overthrow the smothering tyranny of nostalgia. The remaining struggle for me is to make the American readership, meaning the editorial and publishing industries as well, acknowledge the same fact. The foreign-born, the third-world immigrant with non-Western religions and non-European languages and appearance can be as American as any steerage newspaper from Ireland, Italy, or the Russian Pale. My literacy agenda begins by acknowledging that America has transformed me. It does not end until I show how I, and the hundreds and thousands like me, have transformed America. I've had to sensitize editors as well as readers to the richness of the lives I'm writing about. The most moving form of praise I receive from readers can be summed up in 3 words: I never knew. Meaning, I see the people, call them Indians, Filipinos, Koreans, Chinese, around me all the time, and I never knew they had an inner life. I never knew they schemed and cheated, suffered, cared so passionately, when even the forms of praise are so rudimentary. The writer knows she has an inexhaustible fictional population to enumerate, perhaps even a mission. I have been blessed with an enormity of material. The rapid and dramatic transformation of the United States since the early 1970s. Within that perceived perimeter, however, I hope to write surprises. Yet my imaginative home is also the tales told by my mother and grandmother, the world of the Hindu epics. For all the hope and energy I have placed in the process of immigration and accommodation, I am a person who couldn't ride a public bus when she first arrived, and now I'm someone who watches tractor pulls on obscure cable channels. There are parts of me that remain Indian. The form that my stories and novels take inevitably reflects the resources of Indian mythology, shape-changing miracles, godly perspectives. My characters can, I hope, the straitjacket of simple transcend the straitjacket of simple psychologizing. Okay, that's a weird word. The people I write about are culturally and politically several hundred years old. Consider the history they have witnessed: colonialism, technology, education, liberation, civil war. They have shed old identities, taken on new ones, and learned to hide the scars. They may sell you newspapers or clean your offices at night. Writers, especially American writers weaned on affluence and freedom, often disavow the notion of a literary duty or political consciousness, citing the all too frequent examples of writers ruined by their shrill commitments. Glibness around abounds on both sides of the argument, but finally I have to side with my third world compatriots. I do have a duty beyond telling a good story. My duty is to give voice to continents, but to also redefine the nature of American. Okay, so let's go to the first question. Wrong window. One of the main arguments the author is trying to make in this passage is that until recently, foreign-born residents have not wanted to be involved in defining the American reality. Non-Western immigrants are changing the definition of what it means to be an American. The United States immigration policy is inherently unfair. America has changed the political affiliations of most non-Western immigrants. So the first thing we can cross out is C. The United States immigration policy is inherently unfair. Nowhere in this passage does it talk about the United States immigration policy. America has changed the political affiliations of most non-Western immigrants. That makes no sense either. I don't hear anything about political affiliation in this passage, so that makes no sense. So now we've narrowed down to A and B. Until recently, foreign-born residents have not wanted to be involved in defining the American reality, or non-Western immigrants are changing the definition of what it means to be an American. Personally, out of these two answers, I believe that the answer is B. Non-Western immigrants are changing the definition of what it means to be American. So here, the foreign-born, the third world generation, and European life can be as American as any steerage passage from Ireland, Italy, or Pale. My literacy agenda begins by acknowledging that America has transformed me. It does not end until I show that how I and hundreds of thousands like me have transformed America. So essentially, it's saying that they're changing America. They're transforming America and the definition of what it means to be American. Let's check if that's correct, though. In my trusty ACT book, question number 21. The answer is B. Yes, I'm correct. Okay. So that's good. And now, after scrolling down, I can do a new snip of number 22. Considering the information given in the first three paragraphs, lines 1 through 33, which of the following is most accurate description of the author's girlhood and early adulthood? She grew up and was educated in Calcutta, moved to the United States, and lived in Manhattan. She was born in Calcutta, was educated in England by Irish nuns, then moved to Manhattan. She was raised in Bangladesh, educated by Irish nuns in Calcutta, and moved to England and sometime later arrived in the United States. She was born in Prairpur, was educated in Calcutta, then moved to Manhattan. Right away, we can cross out H and J, because if you remember correctly, she was not born in Bangladesh, her father was. And she was not born in Faridpur, her father was. So those are incorrect. If we go back to lines 1 through 33, which don't hesitate to, it's just, this is a very timed portion of the exam, the ACT. So, but yeah, you should always go back. I was born into a class that did not have a name. I attended a school run by Irish nuns who regarded our walled-off school compound in Calcutta as a corner of England. So this isn't in England, it's in Calcutta, but the nuns treat it as if it's in England. So she was born in Calcutta, was educated in England. That's gibberish. It doesn't make sense. The only answer we're left with is F. She grew up and was educated in Calcutta, moved to the United States, and lived in Manhattan. Okay, so let's do number 23. The author sees her literary agenda and her mission to be raising the political consciousness of recent immigrants to the United States, creating characters whose cultural heritage is not easily identifiable, reinterpreting through her stories what it means to be an American, finding an audience for her and her stories and novels. So let's go back to line 44 over here. My literary agenda begins by acknowledging that America has transformed me. It does not end until I show how I and the hundreds and thousands like me have transformed America. Okay, so it also says here, I do have a duty beyond telling a good story. My duty is to give voice to continents, but also to redefine the nature of American. So which one of these answers is closest to redefine the nature of American? It's not D, finding an audience for her stories and novels. She's got an audience regardless. It's not A, raising the political consciousness of recent immigrants. It doesn't talk about politics at all. Creating characters whose cultural heritage is not easily identifiable. That was never mentioned. Answer is C, reinterpreting through her own stories what it means to be American. Which of the following statements from the passage is an acknowledgement by the author that she was changed by America? Okay, so let's read these sentences. The astrologer meant to offer me a melancholy future. All my girlhood I straddle the seesaw of contradictions. I'm someone who watches tractors pull on obscure cable channels. My characters can, I hope, transcend the straitjacket of simple psychologizing. Okay. So F, line 19, let's check that out. The astrologer meant to offer me a melancholy future, to be distant, to leave India, was to be banished from the sources of true culture. So that makes no sense. It doesn't mention how she was changed by America. F is out. G, all my girlhood I straddled seesaw of contradictions, 24 to 25. India had long lived its glories, and if we wanted to be educated modern women, we'd better hit the trail westward. All my girlhood I straddled the seesaw of contradictions. That doesn't express anything about how she was changed by America either. I'm someone who watches the tractor pull on obscure cables, line 68 to 69. If you look at 68 to 69, I'm a person who couldn't ride a public bus when she first arrived, and now I'm someone who watches tractor pull on obscure cable channels. there are parts of me that remain Indian. So obviously she has this access to cable networks and stuff like that, and that's in America. So H could be a possible answer. My characters can, I hope, transcend the straitjacket of simple psychologizing. This line 73 to 74. My characters can, I hope, transcend the straitjacket of simple psychologizing. The people I write about are culturally. So he doesn't really talk about how the author has been changed by America. So J is out, and H is the answer. And let me just check that. Yep, it's the answer. Alright. So, in case you haven't watched my past videos, reading isn't necessarily my best section, but I do enjoy teaching it. So, yeah, I got like a 32 or a 33 in reading, which isn't bad, but it's not perfect either. So, I from time to time, I will be checking in the answers to make sure that everything I'm saying is correct. I don't want to be feeding you guys wrong answers. The author refers to the village of Faridpur as a phantom because it is part of the Indian mythology her mother told her about. She considers Manhattan, not Bangladesh, to be her home. Even though it was once part of India, it is now part of Bangladesh. Even though she considers it to be her ancestral home, she has never been there. Which one of these is true? Well, this makes no sense. C doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, although it's true, it was once part of India, but now it's a part of Bangladesh. It doesn't make much sense because that's not what the main point of the story is about. She considers Manhattan, not Bangladesh, to be her home. Well, it's true that somewhere in the story they mention that it took me 10 painful years to overthrow the smothering tyranny of nostalgia. The remaining struggle for me was to make American readership. I am an American writer in the American mainstream. I try and extend it. So it's true that she accepts that she's American, but nowhere does it actually say that she's she doesn't like respect her Bangladeshi heritage. So that's out. It is a part of Indian mythology her mother told her about. While that's sorta true, you can rule that out also because in this case you're trying to look for the best case answer, and it is a part of Indian mythology her mother told her about. Well, Faridpur is not just a piece of mythology, it's also where her father grew up. The most correct answer is that even though she considers it to be her ancestral home, she has never been there. Her dad was born there, but it states clearly that I speak to his dialect of Bengali and think of myself as belonging to Faridpur, the tiny village that was his birthplace. So it says here, it is the ancestral home of my father. My country, called in Bengali Desh, I have never seen. It is the ancestral home of my father and is now in Bangladesh. Nevertheless, I speak his dialect of Bengali and think of myself as belonging to Faridpur, the tiny village that was his birthplace. So if she thinks of herself as belonging to Faridpur, again, she considers Manhattan, not Bangladesh, to be her home, is totally gibberish. The correct answer is D. Let's do number 26. By the way, if you hear noises, it's because outside I have some people working on my roof, so that's kind of the reason why there's so much noise. But I'll try to get this done regardless. When the author says, that she is trying to extend it. Line 30. She most likely means that she wants to see people from non-European ethnicities included in what is considered considered mainstream American, prefers to be part of both the Indian and American cultures, is trying to find a way to make her home in the United States permanent, is working to change regulations so that many more Indian immigrants can live in the United States. So let's look at line 30. Line 30. I am an American writer and the American mainstream trying to extend it. This is a vitally important statement for me. I'm not an Indian writer, not an expatriate. I am an immigrant. My investment is in American reality, not the Indian. The remaining struggle for me is to make American readership, meaning the editorial and publishing industries as well, acknowledge the same fact that the foreign-born, the third-world immigrant with non-Western religions and non-European languages and appearance can be as American as any steerage passage from Ireland, Italy, or the Russian Pale. So which answer is closest to this? Well, it's not J. Is working to change regulations so that many more Indian immigrants. It doesn't talk about that anywhere in the passage. It's trying to find a way to make her home in the United States permanent. Well, according to her, she already does. She already is permanently living in America, in Manhattan. So that makes no sense. Prefers to be part of the more of both the Indian and American cultures. Well, it kind of says that even though she respects the Indian culture, she says that my investment is in the American reality, not the Indian. So that doesn't make that answer is incorrect too. The correct answer is F. Wants to see people from new European ethnicities included in what is called the mainstream American. And yeah, you see, she says over here that I do have a duty beyond telling a good story, and my duty is to give voice to the continents, but also to redefine the nature of American. She wants to make American not just white, but also Indian, also Chinese, also, you know, she wants to make the immigrants, make people consider the immigrants American as well. And that makes sense, you know, because America is a country of immigrants. But that's just my belief, and that's the way I think should be. Because I'm Indian, by the way. My parents are Indian. I'm born here as a second-generation American. The author implies that she had to sensitize editors because those editors A. did not understand that Asian Americans were already reading her work, B. gave superficial praise to her work but would not publish her novels, C. were overtly discriminatory when it came to non-Western writers, D. tended to view the people she wrote about as one-dimensional. A doesn't make any sense. Did not understand that many Asian Americans were already reading her work. The passage has nothing to do with that. B gave superficial praise to her work, but would not publish her novels. I think somewhere in the passage it actually says she has written some novels before and published them, so that makes no sense either. Were overtly discriminatory when it came to non-Western writers. So these are the last two that we have. And this is a tricky one. It's either C or D, but to narrow it down, let's go look at some of the stuff that they say. It took me 10 painful years, blah, blah, blah. I've had to sensitize writers as well as readers to the richness of the lives I'm writing about. The richness of the lives she's writing about. The most moving form of praise I receive from readers can be summed up in 3 words. I never knew. Meaning, I see these people, called them Indians, Filipinos, Koreans, Chinese, around me all the time, and I never knew that they had an inner life. I never knew that they schemed and cheated, suffered, cared so passionately. So I never knew. It's not we're overtly discriminatory. They viewed these people as one-dimensional. They don't have this inner life. They don't have this these other things. They don't have feelings. So white people viewed these second-generation Americans as one-dimensional, or these cultures. According to the passage, by reading her stories, many of the author's readers learned that good fiction writing obscures cultural differences among characters. They have much more in common with the author's characters than they realize. Stories about immigrants to the United States generally have many more characters than do other types of stories. Because of their immigrant status, people from non-Western countries have developed a stronger inner life than most native-born Americans. So right off the bat, we can cross out J because, to be honest, it doesn't talk anywhere about the comparison between native-born Americans and non-Western countries, immigrants from non-Western countries. So stories about immigrants to the United States generally have many more characters than do other types of stories. That makes no sense either. Nowhere in the passage does it talk about stories about immigrants and characters from other types of stories. So that makes no sense. This isn't a passage about the stories. It's a passage about immigrants, and it's a passage about how they also are American. Good fiction writing obscures cultural differences among the character. That can also be eliminated because nowhere does it focus on fiction writing. But the answer is G. They have much more in common with the author's characters than they ever realized, and this makes sense because here, like in the last question, it said, I never knew they schemed and cheated, suffered, and cared so passionately. When even the forms of praise are so rudimentary, the writer knows she has an inexhaustible fictional population to enumerate, perhaps even a mission. So, yeah, the answer is G, because they never knew that they were so alike with each other. Okay, the first paragraph states that at the time of author's birth, India was engaged in a war with England, not an independent country, still part of Bangladesh, governed by the Irish. Now, this is a little bit tricky, but if you know Indian history, it was never part of Bangladesh. It was never governed by the Irish. But this is a little tricky because it was technically engaged in a war with England at the time, and I happen to know because I'm Indian, and it was definitely not an independent country, and this was a war for independence. So, it's slightly tricky, but you have to think about what it's concentrating on. Nowhere does it talk about the war with England, but it says that India was not even a sovereign nation when I was born, so it was not an independent country. B, that's the correct answer. A is incorrect. Okay, last question for this passage, and yay, the next passage is actually the last one. When the author says that the people she writes about are culturally and politically several hundred years old, she most likely means that her characters have cultural and political viewpoints that are repressive and outdated, have rejected Bengali, British, Irish, and American values, have experienced an incredible amount of change in just one lifetime, are really her mother's and grandmother's ancestors. So right off the bat, we can cross out J because that's gibberish. Let's go to lines 75 and 76. I'm so sorry for the noise. It kind of annoys me too. The people I write about are culturally and politically several hundred years old. Consider the history they have witnessed: colonialism, technology, education, liberation, civil war. They have shed old identities, taken on new ones, and learned to hide the scars. They may sell you newspapers or clean your offices at night. So they're talking about the history that they've all experienced. So have rejected British, Irish, and American values. That makes no sense. That passage doesn't talk anything about that. Have cultural and political viewpoints that are repressive and outdated. Nowhere does it talk about culture and political viewpoints being repressed. Here, H is the correct answer. Have experienced an incredible amount of change in just one lifetime. Okay, guys, so that's today's video. Have a great day, and please subscribe.